The mining planet Zorth 7 was a desolate wasteland, its surface scoured by endless pits and towering machines that clawed at the earth like metallic beasts. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the acrid stench of molten ore. Beneath the harsh glow of twin suns, enslaved beings toiled in silence, their movements mechanical yet burdened with exhaustion. Among them was Lyra, an alien girl whose ethereal beauty stood out even amidst the grime and despair. Her skin, once radiant and reflective like starlight, had dulled under years of captivity. Her large, luminous eyes, twin galaxies swirling with unspoken stories, were now shadowed by fatigue. Yet there was something about her presence that set her apart from the others. It wasn't just her appearance. It was the way she seemed to carry herself despite the weight of her chains. She moved quietly, almost gracefully, as though every step was a silent act of defiance against the oppressive regime that held her captive. Lyra's telepathic abilities, a gift from her people, lay dormant within her. Years of fear and suppression had forced her to bury them deep inside, lest they be discovered and exploited by the ruthless overseers who ruled Zorth 7. These overseers were not kind masters. They were cruel, emotionless machines programmed only to maximize output. They cared nothing for the lives they destroyed, treating sentient beings as mere tools to extract resources for their unseen creators. On this particular day, however, everything would change. For Lyra, and for the galaxy beyond. Captain Ilias Drake crouched behind a jagged rock formation on the outskirts of the facility, his sharp green eyes scanning the horizon through the visor of his helmet. A seasoned warrior known across human space for his tactical brilliance and unwavering sense of justice, Ilias had spent decades fighting against oppression in all its forms. His mission today was no different. Infiltrate the slave labor camp, free as many prisoners as possible, and expose the atrocities committed here to the rest of the civilized worlds. Elias adjusted the settings on his wrist-mounted holomap, reviewing the layout of the compound one last time before making his move. He had memorized the locations of guard patrols, surveillance drones, and escape routes. Every detail mattered. Failure wasn't an option, not when so many lives depended on him. With practiced precision, Elias slipped past the first line of automated sentries, using a combination of stealth and electronic countermeasures. The flickering lights along the perimeter fence dimmed momentarily as he disabled the security system. Moving swiftly but silently, he made his way toward the main holding area where the slaves were kept during shifts. Inside the cavernous chamber, rows upon rows of emaciated figures worked tirelessly, their faces gaunt and hollow. Some glanced up briefly as Elias entered, their expressions shifting from dull resignation to cautious curiosity. But none dared to speak or draw attention to themselves. The penalty for disobedience here was swift and brutal. Elias scanned the room, checking names against his list of priority targets. Most of these individuals were political prisoners or hostages taken during interstellar conflicts. Freeing them would deal a significant blow to the slavers' operations. Yet, as he moved deeper into the facility, something, or rather, someone, caught his eye. In a dimly lit corner, partially hidden by shadows, sat Lyra. Her chains rattled softly as she hugged her knees to her chest, her head bowed low. Unlike the others, she didn't seem to notice Elias's presence at first. Perhaps she assumed he was another overseer come to punish her for some imagined transgression. Or perhaps she simply didn't care anymore. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, Elias hesitated. This wasn't part of the plan. Lyra wasn't on his list. Rescuing her would slow him down, increase the risk of detection. And yet, he couldn't leave her behind. Something about her posture, the quiet dignity she exuded even in captivity, stirred something deep within him. "Hey," he whispered, crouching beside her. His voice was soft but firm, designed to reassure without alarming. Slowly, Lyra raised her head, her luminous eyes meeting his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, as if sensing his intentions, she nodded slightly, her expression unreadable. Elias worked quickly, pulling a small laser cutter from his belt and severing the heavy links binding her wrists and ankles. "Can you walk?" he asked, offering her a hand. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before placing her delicate fingers in his grip. Though weakened by years of malnutrition, she managed to stand, determination flickering in her gaze. As they crept back toward the exit, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. One of the overseers must have noticed the disabled security systems. Panic erupted among the slaves, cries of confusion and fear echoing off the walls. Elias tightened his hold on Lyra's arm, guiding her through the chaos. Their path led them into a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. Behind them, the sound of pursuing footsteps grew louder. Automated turrets activated along the ceiling, spraying bursts of energy that ricocheted dangerously close to their heads. Elias pushed forward, shielding Lyra with his body whenever the gunfire came too near. At one point, they'd reached a dead end, a collapsed section of the tunnel blocking their way. Just as Elias began searching for an alternate route, a group of drones descended from above, cutting off their retreat. Trapped between destruction and capture, Elias prepared to fight. But then something extraordinary happened. Lyra stepped forward, her hands trembling as she raised them toward the drones. At first, nothing seemed to occur. Then, a faint hum filled the air, growing louder until it resonated like a symphony of stars. The drones froze mid-flight, their circuits overloaded by an invisible force. Sparks flew as they crashed to the ground, lifeless. Elias stared at Lyra in disbelief. What was that? She lowered her arms, breathing heavily. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the ringing in their ears. "It's never happened before." Though shaken, Elias didn't waste time questioning further. He grabbed her hand again, leading her through the debris and back onto the main path. By the time they reached the surface, the sounds of pursuit had faded into the distance. Under the blazing light of Zorth 7's twin suns, Elias finally allowed himself a moment to process what had just occurred. Lyra stood beside him, her frail frame silhouetted against the barren landscape. Despite everything she had endured, there was a quiet strength in her stance, a resilience that reminded Elias why he fought for freedom in the first place. "Thank you," she said softly, breaking the silence. Her words carried a weight far greater than gratitude. They were a promise, a vow to repay the debt she felt she owed him. Elias nodded, though his mind raced with questions. Who was she? What had she done to deserve such cruelty? And most importantly, what exactly had saved them back in the tunnel? For now, answers would have to wait. All that mattered was getting off this cursed planet and ensuring Lyra never returned to chains again. The hum of the engines reverberated through the starlight dagger as Captain Elias Drake piloted his battered starship away from Zorth 7. Behind them, the mining planet shrank into a distant speck, its oppressive atmosphere replaced by the cold vastness of space. Inside the ship, Lyra sat curled up on a small bench in the cramped living quarters, her luminous eyes fixed on the viewport. The stars outside shimmered like diamonds scattered across an endless black canvas, and for the first time in years, she felt something other than fear, hope. Elias glanced back at her occasionally while navigating through asteroid fields to evade pursuit. He had smuggled her aboard without hesitation, but now that they were safe, at least temporarily, he couldn't help but wonder if he'd made the right decision. Rescuing slaves was one thing. Bringing someone so clearly out of place into his solitary life was another entirely. Yet there was no denying the spark of connection between them, a fragile thread woven from shared danger and unspoken understanding. When they finally entered hyperspace, Elias set the autopilot and turned to face Lyra. "You hungry?" he asked gruffly, unsure how to bridge the gap between human and alien customs. Lyra blinked slowly, tilting her head as though deciphering his words. Then, with a tentative nod, she replied, "Yes. Thank you." Her voice was soft, almost musical, carrying traces of an accent Elias couldn't identify. He rummaged through the ship's limited supplies, pulling out a few nutrient bars and a container of water. "It's not much," he admitted, handing them to her. "But it'll keep you going." Lyra accepted the food with both hands, examining it curiously before taking a small bite. Her expression softened slightly, and she murmured, "This is good." It wasn't true, not really, but her gratitude was genuine, and Elias found himself smiling faintly despite himself. Over the next few days, their interactions remained cautious but steady. Elias introduced Lyra to basic aspects of human culture, showing her how to operate simple controls, teaching her about Earth's history, and even playing recordings of classical music to pass the time. She listened intently, absorbing everything with a quiet curiosity that fascinated him. In return, Lyra began opening up about herself, or at least what little she remembered. She spoke haltingly of her homeworld, describing it as a place where light danced endlessly across crystal-clear waters and trees, glowed softly under twin moons. Her people, she explained, revered celestial phenomena, believing them to be messages from higher powers. But when pressed for details about her capture or her family, her gaze would grow distant, and she'd fall silent. One evening, as they floated near the edge of a nebula, its swirling colors casting ethereal hues throughout the ship, Elias decided to broach a more personal subject. "You saved us back there," he said, referring to the incident in the tunnel. "How did you do it?" Lyra hesitated, her fingers tracing patterns on the metal floor. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "It just happened. I've always felt things, heard voices, but I never understood them. On Zorth 7, I tried to ignore it because—" She trailed off, her voice trembling. "Because I thought it would make me weaker." Elias leaned forward, his tone gentle yet firm. "That power, it's part of who you are. You shouldn't be afraid of it." For a moment, Lyra looked at him as though seeing him for the first time. There was kindness in his eyes, a sincerity that reminded her why she trusted him. Slowly, she nodded. "Maybe you're right," she whispered, "but I don't know how to control it." "Then we'll figure it out together," Elias said simply. And though he didn't realize it, those 5 words forged a bond deeper than either of them could have imagined. As weeks passed, Lyra grew stronger, not just physically but emotionally. With Elias's encouragement, she began experimenting with her abilities. At first, it was subtle. She'd sense when the ship's systems were malfunctioning, or pick up fragments of Elias's thoughts during moments of intense focus. But gradually her confidence grew, and so did her powers. Their relationship evolved alongside her newfound strength. They communicated less through words and more through gestures, expressions, and sometimes even telepathic impressions. One night, as they gazed at the stars together, Lyra reached out tentatively, brushing her mind against Elias's. What she found startled her, not memories or images, but emotions, determination, loneliness, and beneath it all, a deep well of compassion. "You carry so much pain," she murmured, withdrawing gently. "Why?" Elias stiffened, caught off guard by her insight. For years, he had buried his past beneath layers of duty and discipline, refusing to let anyone see the scars he carried. But something in Lyra's earnest gaze made him want to open up, to trust her the way she trusted him. "My family," he began hesitantly, staring at his hands. "They were killed during a raid when I was young. Ever since, I've dedicated myself to protecting others from suffering the same fate." He paused, then added, "Sometimes, I wonder if I'm doing enough." Lyra placed a hand over his, her touch light, but reassuring. "You've done more than most," she said softly. "You freed me, gave me a chance to live again. That's enough." Her words struck a chord within him, stirring feelings he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge in years. He wanted to say something meaningful, to express his gratitude for her presence in his life, but the moment passed too quickly. Instead, he simply smiled and changed the subject. Despite their growing closeness, danger continued to loom over them. The slavers who controlled Zorth 7 weren't ones to forgive easily. A bounty had been placed on Elias's head, labeling him a terrorist responsible for disrupting their operations. News of his exploits spread rapidly, attracting not only mercenaries, but also a shadowy organization known as the Obsidian Syndicate. Rumors suggested they sought to exploit individuals with unique abilities, like Lyra, for their own gain. One day, while refueling at a remote station, Elias noticed several suspicious ships tailing them. Their markings were unfamiliar, but their intent was clear. He warned Lyra to stay hidden as he prepared for potential combat. "We might need to jump early," he told her, his voice tense. "Hold on tight." Lyra nodded, her earlier serenity replaced by steely resolve. Over the past weeks, she had learned to adapt quickly to threats, trusting Elias to guide her through chaos. As the pursuers closed in, she focused inward, reaching for the power simmering beneath her skin. If necessary, she would fight alongside him, not as a burden, but as an ally. The ensuing chase took them through treacherous asteroid belts and narrow wormholes, testing both their skills and their bond. At one point, a stray blast struck the ship's hull, sending sparks flying and alarms blaring. Elias worked frantically to stabilize the vessel, while Lyra used her abilities to deflect incoming fire, her concentration absolute. Finally, after what felt like hours, they managed to lose their pursuers in a dense nebula. Exhausted but victorious, Elias collapsed into the pilot's chair, letting out a shaky breath. "That was too close," he muttered. Lyra knelt beside him, her expression calm but resolute. "We survived," she said firmly. "And we'll survive whatever comes next, as long as we're together." Her declaration hung in the air, unspoken promises lingering between them. Though neither dared to voice it aloud, they both knew their connection had transcended mere survival. In each other, they had found something rare and precious, a reason to hope, to dream of a future beyond the chains of the past. And so, with the stars guiding their path and trust strengthening their bond, Elias and Lyra continued onward, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in the vast unknown. The starlight dagger drifted silently through the void, its battered hull reflecting the faint glow of a distant nebula. Inside, Elias sat in the cockpit, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the control panel as he monitored their trajectory. They had been traveling for days now, staying off major trade routes to avoid detection by bounty hunters or syndicate operatives. But despite their precautions, tension lingered like an unwelcome shadow. Lyra spent most of her time in the ship's small observation deck, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. Her luminous eyes seemed to drink in every flicker of light, as though searching for something or someone. Among the constellations, occasionally, she would press her palm against the viewport, her touch lingering as if trying to connect with the cosmos beyond. Elias noticed this habit and couldn't help but feel curious. One evening, after securing their course through a particularly dense asteroid field, he joined her in the observation deck. The room was dimly lit, save for the soft glow of starlight filtering through the windows. Lyra didn't turn when he entered. Instead, she continued staring outward, lost in thought. "You spend a lot of time here," Elias remarked, leaning against the wall. His tone was casual, but there was a note of concern beneath it. Lyra glanced at him briefly before returning her gaze to the stars. "They remind me of home," she said softly. "Of what I used to know." Elias hesitated, unsure whether to probe further. He knew so little about her past, and while she had opened up about fragments of her life, much remained shrouded in mystery. Still, something told him that asking might bring them closer, not just as allies, but as friends. "What was your world like?" he asked gently. "You've mentioned it before, but never in detail." For a moment, Lyra didn't respond. Then, with a sigh, she began to speak. Her voice carried a wistful quality, as though each word pulled memories from deep within her soul. "My people called our planet Luminaris," she said. "It was beautiful, a place where light danced across the land and sky. Our cities were built around ancient temples that pulsed with energy, connecting us to the stars themselves. We believe those lights held messages from higher beings, guiding us toward peace and harmony. She paused, her expression darkening slightly. But then, everything changed. Ships came from the darkness, bringing fire and destruction. My family, her voice cracked, and she lowered her head, unable to continue. Elias stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready," he said quietly. "I understand how hard it is to face the past." Lyra nodded, grateful for his understanding. Yet even as she tried to push the painful images away, they lingered at the edges of her mind. Flashes of chaos, the roar of engines, the cries of her people, the cold grip of chains around her wrists. All came rushing back. She clenched her fists tightly, willing herself to stay grounded. As they stood there in silence, Elias noticed something odd tucked away in a corner of the observation deck. It was one of the artifacts he had salvaged during previous missions, a jagged piece of crystalline material etched with intricate patterns. At first glance, it appeared unremarkable, but upon closer inspection, its surface shimmered faintly, almost as if alive. "Where did this come from?" Lyra asked suddenly, pointing at the artifact. Her voice held a strange urgency, as though recognizing something familiar. Elias shrugged. "Found it on some derelict station months ago. Thought it might be worth selling someday." He picked it up carefully, turning it over in his hands. "Why? Do you recognize it?" Lyra hesitated, then reached out tentatively. As her fingers brushed against the crystal, a jolt of energy surged through her body. Images flooded her mind, ancient rituals, glowing temples, and voices chanting in a language she hadn't heard in years. She gasped, stumbling backward as the visions overwhelmed her. "Lyra." Elias caught her before she could fall, steadying her with firm hands. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I don't know," she stammered, clutching her head. "That thing. It's part of my people's history. I saw memories, pieces of who we were." Realization dawned on Elias's face. If this belongs to your civilization, maybe others are out there too. Maybe we can find more clues about what happened to your world. And why. Determined to uncover answers, they decided to investigate further. Using the coordinates embedded in the artifact's patterns, they plotted a new course toward a remote moon orbiting a dying star. Along the way, Lyra began experiencing vivid dreams filled with fragmented memories. She saw herself as a child, playing among glowing trees while her parents watched protectively. She heard echoes of her ancestors' voices, speaking of celestial guardians who once protected their kind. And she felt glimpses of her own latent potential, urging her to embrace the powers she had long feared. When they arrived at the moon, its surface was barren and desolate, pockmarked with craters and littered with debris. Amidst the ruins, however, they discovered remnants of a forgotten civilization, crumbling structures adorned with symbols matching those on the artifact. Lyra wandered among the ruins, her heart pounding with a mix of awe and sorrow. Each carving, each pillar, seemed to whisper secrets meant only for her ears. "This place," she murmured, running her fingers along a weathered stone wall. "It's sacred, a sanctuary for my people." Elias followed closely, scanning the area with his handheld scanner. "There's residual energy here," he noted, frowning at the readings. "Whatever happened here wasn't natural. Someone, or something, destroyed this place deliberately." Before Lyra could respond, a low hum resonated through the air. Startled, they turned to see a faint glow emanating from the center of the ruins. Following the light, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber containing more artifacts, including a large ornate mirror-like device. When Lyra touched it, her reflection shimmered and transformed into a vision of her younger self, standing amidst her people in happier times. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she absorbed the message conveyed by the mirror. Her destiny was tied to reuniting her scattered kin. Though her world had fallen, fragments of its spirit still survived, in relics like these, and perhaps even in other survivors scattered across the galaxy. "We need to find them," she declared, her voice steady despite her emotions. "My people deserve a chance to rebuild, to remember who we are." Elias nodded, resolve hardening in his eyes. "Then that's what we'll do. Together." Their determination was short-lived, however, as alarms blared from Elias's wrist communicator. "We've got company," he growled, pulling out his blaster. Sure enough, ships bearing the insignia of the Obsidian Syndicate descended from the sky, surrounding the ruins. "Seems like we're not the only ones interested in your heritage," Elias muttered grimly. "Let's move." With no time to waste, they grabbed as many artifacts as they could carry and fled into the labyrinthine ruins. Pursued by Syndicate agents armed with advanced weaponry, they relied on both skill and teamwork to evade capture. Lyra used her growing powers to create illusions and disrupt their enemy sensors, buying precious seconds for Elias to formulate escape routes. At one critical juncture, they found themselves cornered in a narrow passageway. With no clear exit, Elias prepared to make a stand. But Lyra stopped him, her eyes blazing with newfound resolve. "Trust me," she whispered, raising her hands. A surge of energy erupted from her, forming a barrier that deflected incoming fire. The Syndicate agents faltered, giving the duo enough time to slip away through a concealed tunnel. Exhausted but triumphant, they emerged onto the moon's surface just as the starlight dagger descended to retrieve them. Back aboard the ship, safe from immediate danger, Lyra collapsed into a seat, trembling with exertion. Elias knelt beside her, concern etched across his face. "You saved us again," he said simply. "Thank you." Lyra managed a weak smile. "I'm starting to believe you were right," she replied. "This power, it's not something to fear. It's part of me, part of who I am." As the ship jumped into hyperspace, leaving the ruined moon far behind, Elias felt a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just fugitives running from danger anymore. They were seekers of truth, bound by a shared mission to restore hope to a fractured people. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, he knew they would face them together, as equals united by trust, courage, and the promise of a brighter future. The starlight dagger hummed steadily as it traversed the vast expanse of space, its course set for a distant star cluster rumored to be home to survivors of Lyra's people. Inside the ship, however, an uneasy tension simmered between Elias and Lyra, a quiet undercurrent that neither dared to address directly. For days, they had been searching tirelessly, following leads and deciphering cryptic messages left behind in ancient ruins or hidden within forgotten databases. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding the fate of luminaries, but it also deepened the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. Lyra felt the burden acutely. She was no longer just a survivor seeking freedom. She was becoming a beacon of hope for her scattered kin. Yet, despite her growing resolve, doubts gnawed at her heart. Elias noticed the change in her demeanor. The once curious, radiant alien girl who marveled at human customs now seemed distant, lost in thought. She spent hours poring over maps and artifacts, her luminous eyes clouded with uncertainty. It pained him to see her struggle, yet he hesitated to intervene. He wasn't sure how to bridge the widening gap between them. One evening, as the ship drifted near a nebula painted in hues of violet and gold, Elias decided to confront the growing silence head-on. "You've been quiet," he said softly, joining her in the observation deck. "Something bothering you?" Lyra glanced at him briefly before turning back to the viewport. "I'm fine," she replied, though her tone betrayed otherwise. After a pause, she added, "It's just all this." She gestured vaguely toward the stars outside. "So much depends on me now. What if I fail? What if I can't find my people? Or worse, what if they don't want me anymore?" Her vulnerability startled Elias. For all her strength and resilience, she still carried insecurities that mirrored his own fears. He sat beside her, leaning forward to meet her gaze. "You're not alone in this," he said firmly. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." His words hung in the air, unspoken promises lingering between them. But even as Lyra nodded gratefully, a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Did Elias truly mean what he said? Or was he simply trying to comfort her, bound by some misplaced sense of duty? Meanwhile, Elias wrestled with his own demons. His past haunted him, the loss of his family, the countless lives he couldn't save, and he feared that staying close to Lyra might put her in greater danger. The Syndicate's relentless pursuit only reinforced his concerns. Every jump through hyperspace felt like a gamble, every landing a potential trap. How could he protect her when enemies lurked around every corner? Their strained dynamic came to a head during a routine stop at a trading outpost nestled within an asteroid belt. The outpost was bustling with activity. Merchants haggling over goods, mercenaries boasting about their exploits, and drifters exchanging rumors over mugs of synth ale. Elias suggested they restock supplies while keeping a low profile, but Lyra insisted on exploring further. "I need answers," she told him, her voice tinged with frustration. "Every lead we follow brings us closer to my people. I can't afford to waste time. And I can't afford to lose you." Elias snapped, surprising even himself. He immediately regretted his outburst, running a hand through his hair as he struggled to compose himself. "Look, I get it. You have a mission. So do I, but rushing into things without thinking will only get us caught, or worse." Lyra stared at him, hurt flashing across her features. "You think I'm reckless?" she asked sharply. "After everything I've done to help you, to fight alongside you, you still doubt me." That evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of amber and violet, the elders called for a gathering beneath the twin moons. Fires crackled in stone-lined pits, casting flickering light across the assembled crowd. Lyra sat cross-legged on a raised platform alongside the council, her posture regal yet approachable. Elias lingered near the edge of the circle, content to remain in the background while she took center stage. One of the elders, a wizened figure with skin like polished silver, rose to address the assembly. His voice carried a weight that silenced the murmurs of conversation. "Today we faced darkness," he began, his gaze sweeping over the gathered masses. "But through unity and courage, we prevailed. Much of this is owed to our sister Lyra, who has awakened powers long thought lost to us." A ripple of applause spread through the crowd, but Lyra lowered her head modestly. When the elder gestured for her to speak, she hesitated briefly before standing. All eyes turned to her, expectant and hopeful. "I am no different from any of you," she said softly, her voice carrying despite its gentleness. "I have suffered loss, known fear, and questioned my place in this vast universe. But today reminded me of something important. We are stronger together. Our ancestors believed in the power of connection, not just between stars, but between hearts. If we embrace that belief, we can rebuild what was broken." Her words resonated deeply, drawing nods and murmurs of agreement. But as the meeting continued, discussions shifted toward practical matters, securing their territory, fortifying defenses, and preparing for future attacks. Plans were made to establish communication networks with other scattered clans, ensuring they could unite if needed. It was clear that survival would require vigilance and sacrifice. Later that night, after the fires had died down and most of the survivors had retired to makeshift shelters, Elias found Lyra sitting alone by a small pool fed by an underground spring. Its surface shimmered under the moonlight, reflecting her luminous form. She stared into the water, her expression contemplative. He approached quietly, seating himself beside her without a word. For a moment, they simply listened to the gentle lapping of the water against the rocks. "You did well today," Elias said finally, breaking the silence. "They trust you." Lyra sighed, tracing patterns on the damp earth with her finger. "Do you think I deserve it?" she asked, her tone tinged with doubt. "I'm still learning who I am. What if I make mistakes? What if I lead them astray?" Elias reached out, covering her hand with his. "You're human. Well, mostly," he added with a faint smile, earning a small laugh from her. "And being human means making mistakes. but it also means growing from them. You've already done more for these people than anyone else could have. Trust yourself, Lyra. They do. His reassurance warmed her heart, easing some of the pressure she felt. Still, there was one question lingering in her mind, one she hadn't dared to ask aloud. What about you? She ventured hesitantly. Will you stay, or will you leave when this is over? Elias stiffened slightly, caught off guard by the directness of her question. Truthfully, he had wrestled with the same dilemma for days. Part of him wanted nothing more than to disappear into the stars again, to return to the solitary life he had led before meeting her. But another part, a part that grew stronger with each passing day, knew he couldn't walk away. Not now. Not from her. I don't know, he admitted honestly. This isn't my fight. But he paused, searching for the right words. Being with you, it's changed me. Made me believe in things I stopped believing in a long time ago. So maybe I'll stick around for a while longer. Lyra's eyes softened, gratitude shining in their depths. Thank you, she whispered, squeezing his hand lightly. For everything. Their moment of quiet understanding was interrupted by a sudden commotion nearby. Voices shouted in alarm, followed by the unmistakable hum of approaching engines. Both Elias and Lyra sprang to their feet, exchanging alarmed glances. The Syndicate? Lyra asked, dread creeping into her voice. Elias shook his head, already sprinting toward the source of the disturbance. Let's find out. When they arrived, they discovered a group of scouts returning from patrol, dragging behind them the wreckage of a Syndicate drone. Its sleek frame was scorched and battered, but its core systems still hummed faintly. One of the scouts held up a data chip salvaged from the device. We found this embedded in its memory banks, he explained, handing it to Elias. Thought you might want to take a look. Back in the relative safety of the council chamber, Elias inserted the chip into a portable terminal. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, interspersed with fragmented images and coordinates. As he deciphered the information, his brow furrowed with concern. They're planning something big, he announced grimly. This chip contains intel on several key locations, including planets inhabited by your people. They're mapping out targets for a coordinated strike. Gasps rippled through the room, panic threatening to take hold. Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Then we must act first. We cannot let them destroy what little remains of our civilization. The council debated strategies late into the night, weighing risks and resources. Ultimately, they decided to split their forces. Some would remain behind to fortify their current position, while others would embark on reconnaissance missions to warn endangered settlements. Lyra volunteered to lead one such mission, insisting that her abilities would be crucial in rallying support. Elias accompanied her, unwilling to let her face danger alone. Together, they boarded the Starlight Dagger, setting course for a distant colony rumored to house a significant population of survivors. Along the way, Lyra delved deeper into her powers, practicing techniques taught to her by the elders. Meditation sessions became a daily ritual, helping her harness her psychic energy with greater precision. Their journey was fraught with peril. Syndicate patrols prowled the star lanes, forcing them to rely on stealth and cunning to avoid detection. On one occasion, they narrowly escaped capture after a malfunctioning cloaking device exposed their position. But through teamwork and sheer determination, they pressed onward, driven by the knowledge that countless lives depended on their success. When they finally reached the colony, they found it teetering on the brink of collapse. Overworked and under-resourced, its inhabitants struggled to maintain basic infrastructure while fending off frequent raids by scavengers. Yet, when Lyra addressed them, her words ignited a spark of hope within their weary hearts. We may have lost much, she told them, standing atop a crumbling platform. But we have not lost ourselves. Together, we can rise again, not as victims, but as warriors of light. Inspired by her resolve, the colonists pledged their support, vowing to join the growing resistance movement. As Elias watched her rally them, pride swelled in his chest. This was Lyra's destiny, to unite her fractured people and guide them toward a brighter future. But even as alliances strengthened and plans solidified, the specter of the Syndicate loomed ever closer. Their relentless pursuit hinted at a larger agenda, one that threatened not just Lyra's people but the balance of power across the galaxy. As they prepared to leave the colony and continue their mission, Elias pulled Lyra aside. "Whatever happens next," he said firmly, meeting her gaze, "we'll face it together, no matter what." She nodded, her luminous eyes reflecting the fire burning within her. "Together," she echoed, sealing their unspoken vow. And so, with renewed purpose and unwavering resolve, Elias and Lyra set forth once more, ready to confront the rising tide of darkness and ignite a rebirth of the stars. The final battle began under the shadow of an eclipsed sun, its light obscured by the ominous silhouette of Syndicate warships descending upon the valley. The survivors of Luminaris had chosen this place as their stronghold, a natural fortress surrounded by jagged cliffs and glowing crystals that pulsed with ancient energy. For days, they had fortified their position, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Lyra stood at the forefront, her luminous form radiating calm despite the chaos swirling around her. Beside her, Elias adjusted his blaster, checking the charge one last time before turning to face her. "Ready?" he asked, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "As ready as I'll ever be," Lyra replied, her gaze unwavering. She reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Whatever happens today, know that I couldn't have done any of this without you." Elias smiled faintly, covering her hand with his own. "Let's just focus on getting through this first. We'll figure out the rest later." Their moment was interrupted by the distant roar of engines and the thunderous footsteps of Syndicate mechs marching across the terrain. The enemy forces were vast, far greater in number than anyone had anticipated, but Lyra and her people refused to yield. This was their home, their legacy, and they would defend it to the last breath. As the battle erupted, chaos consumed the valley. Energy beams crisscrossed the sky, explosions shook the ground, and cries of defiance mingled with shouts of pain. Lyra moved like a beacon of hope amidst the carnage, her powers lighting up the battlefield. With each wave of psychic energy she unleashed, Syndicate forces faltered, their machines short-circuiting and their soldiers overwhelmed by visions of peace and unity. Elias fought alongside her, his movements precise and calculated. He covered her back, picking off enemies who dared approach, while shouting orders to coordinate the resistance fighters. Their teamwork was seamless, born of countless trials and shared trust. Together, they carved paths through the enemy ranks, inspiring others to push forward. But the Syndicate was relentless. Reinforcements poured in from orbiting ships, and the tide of battle shifted dangerously. Lyra felt the strain of using her abilities so intensely. Sweat dripped down her face, and her body trembled with exhaustion. Yet, she refused to give up. Each cry of agony she heard fueled her determination to protect those who depended on her. In the heat of the fight, Elias noticed a critical weakness in the Syndicate's formation, a command unit stationed near the edge of the valley. If they could disable it, the entire operation would collapse. "Lyra," he called out, grabbing her attention. "We need to take out that control center. Can you create a diversion?" She nodded, understanding immediately. Closing her eyes, she extended her arms, summoning every ounce of strength left within her. A brilliant pulse of energy surged outward, enveloping the battlefield in a blinding light. Syndicate troops staggered, disoriented, as the artificial intelligence guiding them malfunctioned under the psychic assault. Seizing the opportunity, Elias led a small team toward the command unit. They moved swiftly, dodging fire and navigating treacherous terrain. When they reached their target, Elias planted explosives with practiced efficiency, setting a timer before signaling the others to retreat. "Fall back," he shouted over comms, sprinting toward safer ground. Behind him, the control unit erupted in a fiery explosion, sending shockwaves rippling through the valley. Syndicate forces scrambled, their coordination shattered. Seeing their advantage, the survivors launched a counterattack, driving the remaining enemies into retreat. When the dust settled, cheers rose from the valley below. Survivors embraced one another, tears streaming down their faces as they celebrated their hard-won victory. The Syndicate's forces withdrew, leaving behind smoldering wreckage and broken machines. It was a triumph not just of strength, but of unity and resilience. Amidst the celebration, Lyra collapsed to her knees, utterly spent. Elias rushed to her side, sliding an arm around her shoulders to support her. "You did it," he said softly, his voice filled with pride. "You saved your people." She shook her head weakly, leaning against him. "Not just me," she murmured. "All of us. Together." That night, beneath the restored glow of twin moons, the survivors gathered once more to honor their fallen and celebrate their future. Fires crackled in stone-lined pits, casting warm light across smiling faces. Music filled the air, blending traditional melodies with improvised harmonies sung by grateful voices. It was during this celebration that Lyra approached Elias, her expression both nervous and resolute. "There's something I need to ask you," she began, her voice trembling slightly. Elias raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What is it?" Taking a deep breath, Lyra knelt before him, bowing her head respectfully. "Elias Drake, you freed me from chains, gave me purpose, and taught me what it means to trust again. Without you, I wouldn't be here today. Will you stay with me? Not just as my ally, but as my partner, for life." Her words took him aback, but only for a moment. Smiling warmly, he knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "Lyra, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. Yes, I'll stay with you. Always." Cheers erupted from the crowd as others witnessed the exchange. Elders stepped forward, offering blessings and ceremonial garlands to symbolize their union. The ceremony blended human traditions with those of Luminaris, creating a unique bond that transcended species and culture. Under the eternal glow of starlight, Elias and Lyra exchanged vows, promising to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. As they sealed their commitment with a kiss, the assembled crowd erupted into applause, celebrating not just their love, but the promise of a brighter future for all sentient beings. In the days that followed, work began to rebuild Luminaris, not just as a physical place, but as a symbol of hope and unity. Lyra emerged as a leader beloved by her people, while Elias found renewed purpose in protecting the fragile peace they had forged. Together, they vowed to free others still trapped in oppression, spreading light to the darkest corners of the galaxy. And so, beneath the endless expanse of stars, two souls from different worlds began a new chapter, united by love, courage, and the unshakable belief that even in the face of darkness, the light of hope would always prevail. The end.